Viola and I were involved in a church in 76, and we were involved with the youth leaders, and we even gave them quite a bit of land on Lake Ozarks. We had a youth camp there. There was a movement of the Spirit with the youth. Also, there was a pull of the youth into immorality and drugs and alcohol, and the Lord would tell me what they were doing. I have to warn them, and it got dangerous, and still they wouldn't turn from it. So I went and warned a couple of the youth leaders twice that Paul and I, we dearly loved them. They were like our son and our daughter. I warned them, but they really got upset the last time I warned them. 2 days later, they were both dead. I warned them about motorcycle, and they were killed on a motorcycle 2 days later.
Because they were in sin is why it was. It wasn't that the enemy could just take them, but he warned them the enemy was seeking to take them. And they said, forget it, we're not getting rid of our sin.
That motorcycle was part of the sin. And so they were killed, and even in the funeral I brought another word. It kept coming. I had heard the church brag just before that, 10 years we haven't had a death. Oh, don't get into pride or brag. Man, you open the door to the devil every time. As they were burying them, the Lord told me, this isn't the last, and they'll be young people, they won't be old. Well, the next day we got a call from another young man that was in the Navy, and he'd went to Swope Park with a couple of black Muslims, and he got drunk, and he tried to swim in the lagoon out there, and he drowned. 2 or 3 days later, a man ran off the road and was killed. And these were young family men. They just died one after another. The women of the church began to look at me and said, don't let him look at your husband. Man can curse you and you'll die. So always all kind of stuff that started going on. And I got so depressed because the young ones are dying. And what bothered me the most is Paul and I, we had some blood kin in there too. And you'd think that'd scare hell out of them, but it didn't. They started running to drugs and alcohol to forget it. They went into immorality, and some of them has never come back to the Lord since then.
So 7 young people under 30 died in a 6-week period. And Bob had given himself fully to this group, and he was so depressed because the group rejected him. And then he called in some sin in the leadership about immorality, and they threw him out of the church. They said, we don't want you here again. And they cast him out, and within weeks, the immorality in the leadership took place, and the people left their spouses, took money from the church. So Bob saw 7 young people under 30 die in 6 weeks. They said, you cursed them. You're the one that cursed the leadership. Get out of here. And so Bob, brokenhearted, and Viola drew back to the church because they were kicked out of it and said, Lord, is there any future? Is there anything we can do? And what, how are we to view this? They were sick at heart for months and months.
A pastor recalled, during the time of my pastorate at Berean Baptist Church, a man by the name of Bob Jones came to our services. Without contacting or consulting the pastor, he proceeded to insert himself as a prophet in every service. He dominated the worship and praise time with dire and foreboding prophecies. The people and pastor grew weary of this continuous foretelling of earthquakes and tragedies coming, until I, as pastor and shepherd of the sheep, asked Bob Jones to come with me and another pastor to my study to counsel him. I requested Bob that for at least a month he sit quietly and be still. Bob refused counsel, refused to be under the subjection of the shepherd, and took off for other churches where he would be free to make his predictions. He was not, and I emphasize not, asked to leave our church. Besides that, he was never a member. Furthermore, it has come to my attention that he prophesied that 7 young men would die and that the pastor and church would not listen to him. That is a lie. Those predictions were never made. My wife, who never missed a service, and has a better memory than me, verifies this fact. I would add this comment on the supposed fact that 2 young people on a motorcycle dying was proof of his prediction. Will and Judy Pliska were accidentally killed by a Christian man who grievously attended the funeral service. Fact. God does not choose one of his saints to kill his saints. The Pliskas were 2 of the most spiritual children I knew. Add to that the funeral was held in my church. I preached the funeral message and gave an invitation to accept Christ. Several young people took Jesus as their Savior that day. A church member recalled, at the maximum, 6 people of all ages died over a 2-year period from March 29, 1976, to January 12, 1978. Dennis Wagner, age 19, died March 29, 1976. He drowned at Swope Park. He was backslidden and had been out of the church for over a year. He was in the Navy. Will and Judy Pliska, ages 31 and perhaps 29. They died in the fall of 1976. They were dedicated Christians and youth leaders. They were not in sin. The police who visited their apartment following their deaths reported finding their Bibles open on the table from their quiet time that morning. Bob Jones did not bring a prophetic word at that funeral about additional people dying. Furthermore, Bob recounts that at the funeral God tells him that more are still to die. And then 2 or 3 days later, a young man drowns in a lagoon. This young man, Dennis Wagner, was the nephew of this church member. As stated previously, he died on March 29, many months before the funeral of Will and Judy, not after. Walt Simon, in his 40s, died December 16, 1976. This man was also a Christian in good standing. He was run off the road and killed. J.R. Smith was a young man who turned a forklift over and accidentally killed himself while at work at Armco Steel. He had attended church there for a short time previously, but had not been involved in any way during the months before his death. Grandma Wynne, age 89, died January 12, 1978. This was the only other recorded death in the church in a 2-year span. Only 3 of these people were under the age of 30. This leading church member testified that Bob Jones had the habit of jumping up at any time he felt like it during the services and prophesying. He was not under submission to the pastor. The church member ended with this final statement: "These deaths could, in no way, be construed as 7 young people involved in sin, dying in a period of 6 weeks. This is a complete exploitation for the purpose of gaining personal credibility as a prophet." Bob Jones was never asked to leave the church. Bob Jones did not publicly give warning to the church. The dramatic death story is often told to prove Bob Jones was a prophet. It is a complete fabrication of facts, totally repudiated by reliable sources who knew the truth.